The National Student Financial Aid Scheme says it's not breaking any law by defunding dishonest students. This comes as the funding body receives backlash from some students. That's because NSFAS has accused students of trying to cheat the system by submitting documents of their relatives as legal guardians in order to qualify for funding. As a result, NSFAS says it's lost 5 billion rand since 2016. For more on this, let's bring in the scheme's spokesperson, Slumezi Skosana, who joins us now via our video link for more. And thanks very much indeed for your time, sir. It's great to have you on the program. According to the records I have at my disposal, 31,000 students have now been defunded since NSFAS introduced this new system. Is that all students who've essentially cheated NSFAS?
Sorry, Ayanda, there was a warp in your voice. I couldn't quite hear the question.
Not a problem. Essentially, my understanding is that 31 students have been affected by NSFAS's decision to defund some learners. Firstly, perhaps let's just ascertain whether that's the right figure, and if indeed all of these students were defunded because they essentially cheated NSFAS.
Thank you very much, Ayanda, and your listeners, rather your viewers at home. Yes, it is true that a total of 45,000 students were affected by the process of re-verification and authentication. And in the end, once all else had been done in terms of, the representations that have been made by them, a total of 31 were completely out of the system in terms of their compliance with our funding norms and standards.
Yeah. So they were allowed to make representations, you say. So this wasn't a unilateral decision from NSFAS?
Yes, no, the door is open. The door is open, for them to come in if they have reasons to believe that we have improperly or incorrectly defunded them.
Right. I mean, that's not the only issue. I mean, I'm sure you must have seen several protests being held in several institutions of higher learning.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, yeah, of course. Yeah, of course, that's not the only issue. The other issues related to our direct funding system, and, to which we have responded sufficiently. I don't know whether you want us to look at that, but let me put it this way, Ayanda. I think this is of great importance. Each and every year, before we open the window, for new applications to be submitted, as NSFAS, we would publish a document that is called NSFAS Eligibility Criteria and Conditions for Financial Aid. And it spells out exactly, how the scheme works, the whole modus operandi. And page 43 and 44 of that 50-page document actually deals with the issue of fraud and combating corruption. And that is where it states clearly that if found guilty, the sanctions that may apply may include withdrawal of the bursary or the grant, the cancellation of allowances, disqualification from ever being able or eligible for NSFAS funding in the future, and repayment of all funding received to date. And so we're not operating outside the policy that we would normally publish at the beginning of the year and share with all stakeholders that would have interest in this.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think if there's anybody who's obviously misrepresented even just their financial standing and in fact aren't eligible for NSFAS, it's pretty clear that they probably shouldn't be getting the money. But I was hoping to hone in more on this direct funding, which is a new thing that NSFAS has introduced. Many of the students we've spoken to saying it actually complicates their lives more than simplify it. In fact, as far as they're concerned, there was nothing wrong with the way in which NSFAS was paying out the allowances. So perhaps let's hear from your end what problem you were trying to solve by bringing in, I understand, third parties to now disperse these funds.
No, look, it's very interesting that somebody would not find anything wrong with a 14 million rand finding its way into wrong hands and, the source of the money being NSFAS and NSFAS not being able to account for that huge amount of money. So let me just state quite emphatically that the direct payment solution comes as a result of having seen, the loopholes in how the monies were being handled. For example, in the case that I just alluded to of the 14 million, the money was given by NSFAS to an institution, and then the institution gave it to a service provider. The service provider dispersed the money to the student, wrongfully so. It was meant to be 1,400, but it ended up being 14 million. We don't know what gremlin went in there, but when questions were asked, and then it was NSFAS money. NSFAS was too far from the action, and then we could not account sufficiently for that. So instead of giving the money to institutions and then institutions deploying their own fintech solutions to disperse the money, we felt it prudent and, of course, legal and appropriate, for us to pay the students' allowances directly. So what we have done, we're working with 4 partners, and these 4 partners are allocated as follows. 2 partners are allocated 8 institutions each, and then 2 partners are allocated 7 institutions each, and then 2 partners are allocated 6 institutions each, which would make up the 26 universities or public institutions that we have in the country. And what would happen is that the students would then have to onboard with the allocated partner so that the payment can be made directly to the student. But what we have found, Ayanda, is that people, put, clerical questions instead on issues that are of strategic and national importance here. They would say, in my account, there was a deduction of 2 rand of this or that, which can be quickly and in 5 minutes, be sorted out by our partners, of course, by ourselves and partner, instantly. But then they use instances like those to say that the whole system is not working when the system is able to process in a day allowance to the tune of 1 billion rand, like we did last week on the 31st of July. So I think we need to put things in perspective, because I would personally wonder, if I wanted to pay you, Ayanda, directly, why would you say to me, I must give the money to your grandma, and then your grandma gives it to your aunt, and then your aunt gives it to you? When I say I want to give you the money directly and be accountable for the delays which have been a major cause of concern for the students. So I am saying that NSFAS stands for the rights of students. And we are very conscious of where the students come from, and we would not want to jeopardize the gains that the students have made the last 47 years since 1976, when they've been fighting this cause. So the direct payment issue for us is critical. Because in the past, we've also seen flare-ups of protests on campuses. Yeah. And then when we look at why there are flare-ups on campuses, we would be told that among the issues that students are fighting for is that NSFAS has not paid the money in advance, or rather has not paid allowances, when at that point we would have paid the money in advance to institutions, and given the institutions the responsibility to allocate that money to their various cost centers, such as your tuition, your accommodation, and your allowances. And sure, we would be aggrieved from our part to find that the students are complaining, having not received their allowances, when we know that the institutions have received their money.
I'm sure, Mr. Skosana, you'll also agree that it's important not to downplay the plight of students. I mean, if it is true, for instance, that this 2 rand is being deducted from their accounts, I mean, these are students who, in many instances, rely solely on NSFAS, and every rand or every cent, quite frankly, counts. If you have 2 rand being deducted every month, over 12 months, that's not something necessarily to be scoffed at. So if that is true, at the very least, an explanation, I think, is what students should be given at the very least.
But, I agree with you wholeheartedly, Ayanda. But, the point that I was making is that should not be used to make judgment on the efficacy of the solution. So that's just the point that I'm making. And also, I was saying that whenever that happens, there is a recourse. A student can call the toll-free number of NSFAS and partner and just get that resolved forthwith. And also, but Ayanda, as much as that is an important element, I would caution against inculcating a culture of zero rating things at every twist and turn, just because a person is a student. I know I run the risk of being lambasted, but here, Ayanda, we are grooming and molding young people who we expect would be equipped, to respond victoriously to the challenges of the future, and to give the students the impression that things, should be for free. I'm afraid we may be inculcating a culture of entitlement. I'm afraid we may be inculcating a culture of food parcel mentality, where people don't expect to pay for anything. Because I can tell you now, in less than a year or so, these students will be graduating. They will be participating in the socio-economic life of South Africa, and the reality will be different. There'll be nothing there for free. They will have to pay for the fees. So NSFAS is not unreasonable in what it has said. At the beginning, when the solution was designed, we kind of put everything into one basket and said this would be the cost of doing the direct payment. But then after looking at the possible spending trends of the students, we then said the amount, or rather the management fee for the account would be 12 Rand only. And then the other out-of-bundle things, we respect the dignity of the student, to be financially prudent and literate and be able to run the account by saying, for those aspects of transacting, you will have to be prudent and choose whether you want to swipe, you want to withdraw, you want to withdraw at a retailer, you want to, we leave that financial freedom,
right,
to the student to transact in as cost-effective a method as they can.
Sure,
so
okay,
that latitude with them.
I think the point is well made, and it's probably worth emphasizing, Mr. Skosana, of course, not to come across as being patronizing to students who, in many instances, many of them are receiving this money because they've earned it, despite the fact that there is a need. I think, especially when there are tensions that are heightened, to come across and suggest that there are some students who are being entitled by asking why there's deductions they don't understand may not necessarily land well in a context where we're trying to find solutions. But I think I've given you time to explain when this was coming from. Thank you for your time. Really do appreciate it. And hopefully all the aggrieved students and yourselves will be able to find common ground rather sooner than later. That there is Slumezi Skosana, who's a spokesperson of NSFAS. Once again, thanks very much indeed.